So I felt like revisiting another anime from my youth. Iria Zeiram The Animation. This is something I picked up in the early to mid 2000s. I didn't know anything about it, but I just knew that this cover looked cool. Tell me that cover doesn't look cool. She's a bounty hunter with a score to settle. I mean, that's just such a cool looking character if I do say so myself. But yeah, I picked this up and I was not disappointed. I loved this thing. I was so impressed. And it's been a long time. It had been a long time since I watched this. I was wondering if it was as good as I remembered it. Surely it was. But yeah, it was pretty good. It has aged, I will say, but we're going to get into all this. This is actually a 6-episode OVA, and it was based on a couple of live-action movies, which I had no idea about at the time, and I just watched those movies for the first time before making this video, and I've got some things to say about the anime, about the live-action movies. Let's get into this. We'll start with the anime. A lot of people say that this is a prequel to the movies. I disagree. This is not a prequel. It's more of an alternate telling of the story. It's a different interpretation. There's so many changes that they made to the anime that you really can't consider it canon to the movies. Looking at the movies as a direct continuation of the anime story just doesn't make sense at all. So throw that out the window. But let's talk about the anime first. It follows Iria, who is kind of a young rookie bounty hunter, and she takes a dangerous job with her brother one day and gets tangled up with this awful, terrifying alien called Zeiram. And this alien basically takes her brother. She doesn't know if her brother's still alive or dead, but she spends the rest of the series trying to hunt down this alien and either save or avenge her brother and basically save the universe at the same time. What I loved about this anime is just how imaginative it is. It really has its own distinctive style. It's very sci-fi, futuristic, but at the same time there are so many elements of just kind of primitive things thrown in. Like you might see a laser cannon that looks like bamboo. And even just looking at Iria herself, she's got this super modern looking body armor and suit, but she usually covers it up in this like old raggedy looking cloak that people might have worn hundreds of years ago. I don't want to call it steampunk because steampunk is usually set in the past but with futuristic elements. This is more set in the future but with some elements of the past. It's very cool. I love the world building, the whole kind of style that they went with here. Very much has a style of its own. There's a lot of cool action scenes in here. The action is great. The character designs are very cool as well. Of course, Iria, you see she's supposed to be very beautiful and attractive, and her bodysuit, her armor is so cool looking. She's got all these big guns she can wreck stuff with. And then Zeiram, also the bad guy, he looks like nothing else I've ever seen. Very, very unusual design. He's this big, like huge, human looking guy in his body, and then he's got this like mushroom top head. But his face is this little tiny white face with red eyes and fangs, and this little face can like jump out of the head like kind of like a snake, and it bites people, and it harvests some of their cells, and then it can create clones from their cells, and it creates these hideous monstrosities based on the cells that it ingests. So it's pretty crazy, man. You see some gruesome stuff here. There are some pretty nasty scenes. You see people just being, devoured by this thing, and it's pretty crazy. But at the same time, it's not like a horror anime or anything like that. It's just a very cool action sci-fi story. There are a lot of fun and interesting supporting characters as well. Early on, we see Bob, Iria's friend, and well, he's on the verge of death, and his conscience, his personality basically gets transferred over to an artificial intelligence, and then this AI version of Bob follows her around. And I don't think that's spoiling too much because it's early on, and if you've watched the movies, you know that Bob is an AI, and it's there in all the movies. She has other friends from the beginning, and more friends she gets to meet along the way, a couple of kids who she kind of becomes a role model to, and I will say the anime has a lot of heart. It's very cool, very action-packed. I remember it looking a lot more sharp and kind of visually impressive. This thing's almost 30 years old. It came out in 1994, and you can really see the age. I would love to see a really high fidelity remaster on this. I think that would be really cool. I don't really think that's going to happen, but maybe, who knows? It shows its age for sure, but really, even though we don't see the bright, crisp, really impressive cutting edge stuff that we see today in anime, that's all made up for by just the really cool designs, the really cool kind of choreography, cinematography. I don't know if those words work in animation, but you know what I'm talking about. Everything just looks really cool. The whole world building, the environments, everything is so interesting to see and look at. And the characters are well written and well developed, and it's enough to suck you in and keep you entertained through those 6 episodes. Definitely recommend checking it out. You can watch it on Retro Crush. I think it's also on Freevee right now, but all that stuff changes all the time, and depending where you live, watch it wherever you can. This was something I was just excited to pick up back in the day because it was a whole series. 6-episode series, but it's a whole series on one disc and at a cheap price. That was very rare back in the day. I've talked about this too many times already on this channel, but yeah. It was a bargain, and it was a great series, unlike anything else I'd ever seen. I really loved it. But I didn't want to go into this video today talking about this anime without seeing the movies that it was based on. So I went and I watched Zeiram and Zeiram 2. Now, they are not what I was expecting. So Zeiram 1, I will do a disclaimer and tell you that I watched this in the worst way possible, but it's very hard to find this movie even on the internet. So somebody had uploaded it to YouTube, which I am grateful for. Unfortunately, it's the English dub, which is not a good dub. I would have loved to see it subtitled, but it was an old English dub and it was in like 360p resolution, so it was very blurry and the dub was just bad. But at least I was able to see what it was all about. I was able to see the movie, and for that I'm grateful. Really not what I expected though, because I was expecting it to pick up where the anime left off, or at least have some sort of kind of congruency with the anime. No, none of it would have made sense after watching the anime. So I was feeling a little bit let down. I had been spoiled by the anime. I was spoiled by the anime, by all the imaginative stuff they were able to do in the animation, with no budget constraints, no need for expensive props and sets and all this. They were able to do so much. But this movie, it seemed a little low budget and very limited in scope. That's okay. As long as the story's there, if the characters are there and you care about what's going on. I didn't really care about any of that stuff that much in this movie. That's what pains me to say. It was cool to see Iria live action. She's very beautiful and very cool whenever she kicks into action. Her suit looks cool and everything else. But there just wasn't enough Iria. What? I wanted to see more Iria. But no. So there are 2 supporting characters in this movie that play big roles, and one of them's just kind of a big goofball, the other one's more of a straight man, but they're both just kind of like thrown into the situation and feeling out of place, and they gave the movie really an overall different tone than I would have expected, and so much different from the animation. But so much of the movie was just the 2 of them kind of running away from Zeiram and doing their thing, and Iria was trapped somewhere else, communicating over the phone, and I'm like, Iria, get over here and do something, kick some butt. I mean, this is your movie, you're the heroine, you're the protagonist, and so much of it, she was just on the sidelines, so that was a little disappointing. But, it was cool to see Zeiram live action too. Of course, this is a movie that I think came out in like 1991 or 92, and so, yeah, you can tell it's a costume, or it's a puppet in this scene, but still it was very cool because it is such a crazy, weird-looking creature. And when you see those close-up shots of the face, man, that is creepy. That is very creepy. It's amazing what could be done without CGI sometimes. It was cool. They did some cool things here. I felt like it might have had a little bit of an identity crisis sometimes. I couldn't tell if they wanted to be an action movie, a comedy, or even a horror film at times. It was like elements of each of these and I was just thrown off. I was confused. I wasn't really digging the vibe. I was kind of, I hate to say this, but I was kind of getting some like Power Rangers vibes sometimes, only a little bit darker, maybe more Kamen Rider vibes. But I think I was just coming off of the animation with certain expectations that just weren't met. The other thing about it, I mean, the animation, like I talked about before, the world building was so unique and creative and different. It really felt very exotic and foreign and alien. And this movie's just in Japan. It's just like modern day Japan, and Iria felt so out of place. Of course, she's not from this world, but she was just kind of here staying in Japan for a little bit, and Zeiram came to Japan, and that's great. I love Japan. I'm the old weeb, right? I want to die an old man in Japan. But yeah, it was just unexpected. It seemed very small in scope. The plot was totally different. There wasn't enough Iria. And, the humor for me just didn't really land. There was a lot of exaggerated acting, just overacting, and I just didn't know how to feel about it. However, I think if I would have set aside my expectations to begin with, not been spoiled by the anime, maybe it would have been a little bit better. Surely if I didn't watch that horrible English dub, it would have been even better. But still, it was the original take on Zeiram and Iria, and I am thankful for that movie because it brought about the rest of the franchise and it brought about that great animation, which I love. I will say that after I had some time to digest that movie, I came to like it a little bit more, and I was ready to go into Zeiram 2. I still not knowing what to expect, to be honest. I was wondering if Zeiram 2 would have gone in a different direction because it came out the same year as the anime OVA. I'm like, okay, maybe they're establishing more of the things we saw in the animation. Yes and no. Yes and no. But I will say those two characters I didn't like in the first movie, by the end of the movie, they grew on me. And by the second movie, I was glad to see them again. For some reason, I was glad to see them again. I was like, yay, the gang's all back. But stepping into the second movie, Zeiram 2 is immediately evidence that this is a much higher budget film. And thankfully, this time, this movie's easy to find everywhere. I watched it on Retro Crush, 720p or whatever. Pretty good quality and subtitled, so I got to hear all the actors' actual voices, and it was much more enjoyable. But yeah, much bigger budget film, you could tell. There's so many more special effects. Just the set pieces were much bigger and more impressive. There was a lot more going on, more action sequences, more characters introduced. Overall, I'd say it was a much better movie. But don't watch it unless you've seen the first movie. That's my recommendation. And still, you gotta set aside in your mind, this is a whole different beast from the animation. Just get rid of the animation in your mind if you're going into these live action movies. Because aside from the two main characters, Iria and Zeiram, everything else is different. Even their backstories. Iria's backstory, Zeiram's backstory. We don't get a lot of the backstory in the movies, and that's one thing that was a little disappointing. I feel like the animation had a lot of good character development, and we saw what motivated Iria. We saw kind of where she was coming from. We even got to know where Zeiram was coming from. What's the story with that? There was a whole lot more involved, and I think just a whole lot more heart in some cases. Now, the two male protagonists do have a lot of heart. They're very likable characters, I guess. Either you like them or you don't, but they're supposed to be likable characters. Iria, on the other hand, though, she just is very stoic in the movies. She doesn't usually show a lot of emotion. She doesn't seem that interesting. Again, she's very beautiful and very cool when she springs into action and is fighting bad guys. But, I didn't fall in love with the character like I did in the anime. I really cared about the character. I feel like we got to know that character, and then in the movies, she's just very uninteresting, kind of. I hate to say it, but she's more two-dimensional in the live action than in the anime. But, I just think there wasn't the same kind of character development. There wasn't the same backstory. There wasn't as much to love about the live actions. But it is a different beast entirely, and, I enjoyed it in the end. I'm glad I watched them. Very different experience, not what I was expecting at all, but fun to watch. At the end of the day, do I recommend watching all this stuff? Maybe. I definitely recommend the anime. Wholeheartedly recommend this anime as long as you don't mind, it is an older one. The animation is a little dated, but it is still so cool. All the designs, everything. It's a good story. Something you can watch in an afternoon. It's a couple of hours for the whole series, right? And if you like what you're seeing here, if you like that anime and you just can't get enough, you want to see more, then yeah, definitely, by all means, check out the original movies. Just go into it knowing that it's not going to be the same. It's not going to be like the anime. Characters are totally different. The backstories are totally different. And again, they're a little cheesy. You know, these are also 30-year-old movies and we've come a long way, which is fine if you're not relying on special effects. You know, if you're relying on a good story, then that's perfectly okay. I love old movies. I just feel like this was more about the special effects and the crazy alien creatures, and you know, the stories were a little weak, I'm sorry to say. But I know a lot of people love these movies and I hate to just talk bad about them. At the end of the day, I enjoyed them. Just, I was spoiled by the anime. That's really what it comes down to. So, anyways, if you still can't get enough Iria, they actually made a couple of video games too. There was one on the Super Nintendo, the Super Famicom. It never came out in the West. It was only in Japan. And also on the PlayStation 1, there was another game. And I don't know that either game is very good. Haven't played them myself. But they're out there. If you're looking for merch for this stuff, man, dude, it's so expensive. It's ridiculous. There's not much out there. I was looking on eBay. There's not a lot out there. The DVDs are still cheap though. But nowadays you can just watch this thing anywhere. So watch it for free, watch it on your favorite streaming service, whatever you want to do. Anyways, let me know your thoughts on Iria or Zeiram. Have you watched any of this stuff? Are you a fan? I would love to hear from you. And if you have any other recommendations for things I should check out, I would love to hear that as well. So anyways, thank you so much for watching and listening to this idiot ramble on. I appreciate you so much. You have a great day. I will see you next time.